It's another Football Friday with the Oklahoman crowd. This is Mike Sherman, sports editor of the Oklahoman, joined by our columnist here in the newsroom, 100 West Main in downtown Oklahoma City, columnist Jenni Carlson.
Morning.
Good morning. From his home in Norman, I believe, OU beat writer Jason Kersey. Hey, Jason. We believe we'll be joined in progress by OSU beat writer Kyle Fredrickson and maybe, just maybe, a special cameo appearance by columnist Barry Trammell. Jason, Jenni, let's start with our at the movies approach to covering college football this year. Jason, you, as much as anyone, have been responsible for this. Let's go back to the Star Wars theme, The Force Awakens, and think about it. How'd that theme hold up for us covering college football in Oklahoma in 2015?
Oh, I think it held up pretty well. The Force did awaken in Norman. It worked out quite well. Lincoln Riley's offense turned out to be exactly what they needed to get rolling and get back in the national championship hunt. OSU's offense was really good this year for the most part. So, I mean, in terms of the passing game anyway, in terms of the air raid stuff. So I think it worked out pretty well. I think we nailed it.
We nailed it last night. I have to confess, I was among those who went to see the Star Wars The Force Awakens on the very first night. I don't think we could have anticipated hardwiring our theme to a movie we hadn't seen. But Jason, there was something unique as I reviewed our special section, and that was we really didn't know up until the 11th hour who the quarterback was going to be. We did not know, and we did not know how strong the force was going to be with Baker Mayfield. We tried to recover a little bit, but don't you, in some ways, Mayfield's surprise, even that worked with the section.
Yeah, it absolutely did. He was, he was incredible this season, and I think better than just about any of us could have imagined. He was kind of a lost guy, a guy who, had bounced around schools once and was kind of underappreciated. Nobody really knew about him, and he winds up, being very force sensitive, I guess. So in a way, I guess he's kind of like a young Luke Skywalker.
Jenni, you're laughing. You're laughing at us. I don't think you're laughing with us.
I think Luke Skywalker would like to have Baker Mayfield's hair at this point in his life, if I had to guess. But that's just
no spoilers, by the way. I haven't seen the movie yet. So
I'm not saying anything.
I got nothing.
I'm not saying anything. Jenni, you were tasked with, I bring up movies. The whole theme of today is at the movies with the Oklahoman Sports Department because we've dipped to that well again. We got a section coming out on Sunday. It's sort of celebrating the bowl season, looking at it from sort of a fun standpoint. Back to the Future. Jenni, you were tasked with the sort of introductory column for that. Did you binge watch Back to the Future? Did you rely on relatives, or did you just go off Jason's notes from that night he stayed up and watched all three?
Yeah, I did not binge watch like I am pretty sure Jason has since he came up with the idea for the Back to the Future. I mean, it's a perfect hook. Jason, I think, tweeted this, and then it got traction as we went. There's a scene in Back to the Future Part 2 where Marty McFly's in the car, about to go back home after saving his kids from their demise in the future, and it has a list of years. It shows where he is, which is 2015, our current year. It shows where he's headed back to, which is 1985, even though the movie came out in 1989. And then it shows where the DeLorean with the flux capacitor last visited, which was 1955. And if you're a Sooner fan, you know that 55 was a championship year, 85 was a championship year, and now here the Sooners set in 15 looking to try to win another championship. But as we thought about it, it wasn't just about the Sooners and those years. It was also about the Sooners going back and reintroducing the air raid offense. It was about OSU going back to the Sugar Bowl, a place it hasn't been in 70 years. So this had a lot of sort of backward, as we look forward, connotations this bowl season. So it worked out perfectly. No, I have not binge watched Back to the Future, the trilogy, or any of them, frankly. But it gave me a good excuse to dig deep into my own personal knowledge, thanks to my husband, who loves the Back to the Future movies. And there's also a ton of websites out there with lots of quotes and lots of reminders, and that was fun to go through. So I did that instead of binge watching like
so you use the Cliff Notes version, basically, of Back to the Future?
I used what you sent, which was really good.
Spark Notes. Let's call them Spark Notes.
Yeah, so I mean, I go to all different wells to draw from, but I had a pretty good stockpile of knowledge myself. I'm not a guru like you, Jason, but
it just reminds me of high school when I had to read, like a big boring novel that I didn't want to read, and so I just went to the Spark Notes.
It's not boring. That's the thing. It's great. I love the Back to the Future.
I'm just kidding.
Although I have to admit, I have seen a small hole in my knowledge in that I don't really know the third one as well. I was thinking about that when I was writing. If what we were talking about was about the third one, I'd have a little bit harder time with that one.
I believe we've been joined by Barry Trammell from his home in Norman. Barry, you out there?
Well, I don't know if I'm in the future or where I'm at. I'm unclear.
How clear were you on the whole Back to the Future subject when we started down this road a couple weeks ago?
I don't know what you mean by clear, but I mean when you said the movies were based in 55, 85, and 2015, I thought, hey, okay. I didn't know that, but I take you guys' word for it. So sounds good to me. Jackie O's right. Those are landmark seasons in Oklahoma football.
Have you watched any of the 3 episodes, Barry?
I saw the original when it came out. I haven't seen the other 2 or 3 or 7 to ever. I don't know how many there are, but I saw the original.
Frankly, I think the original is the best. I don't know what Jason would say, but I think the first one's the best one.
Yeah, it's definitely the best.
Yeah.
Barry, we also talked about the Star Wars theme. The Star Wars came out last night. I happen to be the only person on this episode that's actually seen it. I'm not going to give you any spoilers. How well do you think our Star Wars theme held up as far as the way the season played out?
You got me on that one. I can't even remember. I remember the look, but I don't. I mean,
so memorable.
I don't know what we said back in August. So I'm pretty sure we didn't proclaim Baker Mayfield some sort of budding star. So probably failed. That would have been, Star Wars. Star Wars is actually a great description of the Orange Bowl. We got the 2 best quarterbacks in America, the 2 most acclaimed quarterbacks in America dueling. So that we might should have saved Star Wars for the Orange Bowl.
Now he tells me.
No, he's just not remembering what we did. That's the thing.
He also doesn't know anything about Star Wars. So, I mean, don't ask him those questions.
Okay, Barry, I can ask him this question. Barry, what's the best theme we ever did? We've been doing this for a while. We've kind of tried to, going back to the late 1990s, I think we really sort of got more serious about having a theme. We used to have one way back in the day. But what's the best one we ever did for a season, for a series, for playoffs, what?
Well, I mean, in terms of the best look, and I mean, you talk about it often, our 07 with Game of Our Century, statehood in 07, had a bunch of cool pictures with old players and new players, and that was maybe the most classy. In terms of just flat out fun, I like the one we did in 2000, which was those magnificent men and their flying machines, and the advent of passing in Oklahoma, and the arrival of Mike Leach and the spread offense to this part of the country, and we had all kinds of cool photos set up. That's back in the day when you could get coaches and players to actually, they'd be willing to cooperate. We got OU players at the airport, for crying out loud. So that was a lot of fun. those days are past, so you can't really do that anymore.
Jenni, do you think Barry's insinuating that Bob Stoops would not dress up as Obi-Wan Kenobi, or that Mike Gundy would not be Kylo Ren, or I don't know, Luke Skywalker? I mean, that really?
I'm guessing not. I suppose that would not happen. But Barry's right. Not only that 2000 section to preview the year, but the 99 section, that was when Stoops had just arrived and Bob Simmons was at OSU, and we got him to meet, although this was actually right before I got here, so I was not involved with the planning. I only saw the result. We got them to meet at Frontier City and pose together as gunslingers. And it was awesome. And there's no way that would happen ever. We can't even get them in a costume to then Photoshop them together. So, I mean, that sort of thing is not happening anymore. But, I mean, that was super cool.
Barry,
It was awesome, I have to say.
Barry,
Were you there for the picture, Barry?
I was there when it happened. Yes, I was.
Awesome.
Barry,
Me and Tim Parks and I guess a photographer. I don't think we took the picture.
Barry, was that the beginning of the end, though? There are some stories that have been bannered around through the years that maybe Bob Stoops took some ribbing from colleagues.
I blame Matt McMillan, his longtime friend and a right-hand man. Matt's been mocking Bob ever since that picture where Bob looked a lot like Brett Maverick, had the cool black and red, looked like he just walked out of a card game and had cleaned up the saloon. So I thought he looked pretty cool, but he never heard the end of it, and he vowed never again. And to his credit, he's lived up to his vow. It's never been done again.
So
Baker, I bet we could get Baker to dress up.
Well, Mayfield, heck, he'd do it. Stryker, all the players would do it. You know what was a cool one? American Idol was cool. I thought that was pretty good. That was the year we had Bradford and Zach Robinson and all kinds of idols walking among us.
Oklahoma Idol it was, I do believe.
Oklahoma Idol, that's exactly right.
And I think the theme was really great, and then fell flat because the season was a disaster for the Sooners, especially. Everybody got hurt.
While I'm not answering questions, I'm going to be digging through my file to see if I have any of those old sections. I might have something here to show before the hangout's over.
Visual aid.
I dug out a few of those myself this morning. Guys, the force, let's go back to the force, but particularly Baker Mayfield. I think we found out that Mayfield was going to be the starter right on deadline, Jason. None of us saw this season coming. Is that the reason why Mayfield got so few Heisman votes, that it was such a surprise, and that a lot of the other candidates were people who were sort of destined and conceived to be Heisman candidates going in?
I don't know about that. I mean, I think that he was hurt more by the fact that they had the Texas loss in which he didn't play very well. They didn't play a conference championship game. So that last weekend when the voters were all watching games, they had to watch Derrick Henry, Deshaun Watson, and Christian McCaffrey play, and Baker didn't play. And he didn't play, he played really well in the Bedlam game, but he didn't put up big numbers. And then he missed the second half of the TCU game, which also contributed to his numbers being down. So, I mean, I think those are the reasons why he didn't get more traction as a Heisman candidate more than anything. I mean, if the Heisman was based on the early season or even the preseason, Leonard Fournette would have been invited, and he wasn't.
Barry, explain the Sporting News Player of the Year then. If he's not invited to the Heisman, yet he gets the Sporting News College Football Player of the Year.
Well, way too much analysis goes into the Heisman Trophy, winning and voting and speculation every year. You got 1,000 people voting. My estimation is about 1/3 of them have a clue. Out of the third that have a clue, about half of them really care. So it's not to be taken too seriously. It's a little bit like some of these movie award votes. I mean, for crying out loud, let's not get too worked up. Who was it? Was it Two Live Crew that won an Oscar before before Martin Scorsese, I think. Isn't that right?
Did Barry just reference Two Live Crew? What
did.
is happening here?
I believe I did.
Oh my goodness.
You know, if Martin Scorsese can wait on an Oscar, I mean, I don't know why Baker Mayfield feels like he got wronged for a Heisman. The Sporting News is, Matt Hayes is the main guy. He might have a panel that helps him, but basically, they just made a decision, and sometimes you make those things and look for a different winner. You try to find a niche that somebody else didn't fill. So Mayfield's had a phenomenal year. He's made multiple All-American teams first team. So that's a great year. And just because you didn't make the Heisman, win the Heisman, or make the Heisman finalist, get a trip to New York, I wouldn't take it as a slight. That's just sort of the way it goes when you have an electorate as we do with the Heisman.
Well, here's another thing to think about, guys. You're right, Barry. If Matt Hayes or whoever is involved with that decision, as maybe they're looking at it from the perspective of who's the guy that would be most missed on a team. And if you look at Alabama, if you took Derrick Henry off, sure, they wouldn't maybe be as good, but you got to think there are some other guys that they'd figure out a way to score some points. Their defense is still pretty solid. If you took Watson off Clemson, does that change things? Sure. Would seem to change it quite a bit. But I almost wonder if in this equation, the fact that Baker Mayfield's hurt during the TCU game is evidence. It smacks a person in the face of how much of a difference he makes for Oklahoma. Maybe that was ultimately the decider that, hey, everybody got to see Oklahoma sans Baker Mayfield this year, and they didn't like what they saw, and neither did anybody at OU. So maybe that's the difference. I don't know. I think it is interesting, but, like Barry said, the 1,000 voters for the Heisman, it's a little hard to get too wrangled when, they pick. If they pick somebody, different people pick different people. That's just the way it goes.
Guys, Barry brought up the Oscar references. I would just say that if this hangout was giving out cinematography awards, best Oscar for best cinematography, I think Jenni would get it. I'm not sure Jason would. You're cutting off the top of your head. And Barry, there's some sort of upper looking up. I'm not sure about the camera angle. So
we're getting a good Barry's nose shot from this angle.
Remember the time he was all blue?
Yes.
We're better than that. So anyway,
Oompa Loompa time.
Yeah, that was something.
That was something.
Jason, back to one more question about Mayfield. Actually, let me ask Barry this question. We wrote a lot this week about Mayfield's hope for gaining another year of eligibility. A Lubbock columnist went in on Mayfield and his dad in a column, a scathing column, blaming them for their problems. Where do you come down on that? Is Mayfield a sort of a victim, or did he create the situation?
I think maybe neither one. The Big 12 rule is actually a solid rule. They don't want people transferring within the conference. So they have a rule that prohibits it, or that not prohibits it, they have a rule that discourages it. It's a solid rule. If you want to transfer within the conference, it costs you a year of eligibility. So I don't have a problem with that rule. If they want to change the rule, change it. But it seems like a solid rule, and the Mayfields knew it when it happened. So, I don't have a problem with the rule. Now, who was to blame in terms of the breakdown in Lubbock? I don't have any idea. I can tell you this: the evidence appears to be that Cliff Kingsbury has some issues with quarterbacks. So, I'm not sure I'd want to be defending Kingsbury at this point. But I don't have a problem with the Big 12 conference rule.
Barry, is now the time to bring out your idea for how Mayfield could indeed go get him another year of eligibility?
No.
Okay. Let's bring in Kyle Fredrickson, our OSU beat writer. Fresh off an interview with Emmanuel Ogba's dad, but that's really not what we're going to ask him about. The hot topic, I think, in Stillwater is Mason Rudolph's foot. Kyle, is there any chance that Mike Gundy knows exactly what's going to happen? And as Barry asserted yesterday on the blog and in today's Oklahoman, might just be talking up Rudolph's availability to give Ole Miss something else to worry about?
It's very possible. I would not put it past Gundy, one bit for him to kind of use the media to kind of manipulate the ideas about this team and what they're going to bring in that Sugar Bowl, because it maybe just adds a little bit more pressure on Ole Miss to prepare for two different types of quarterbacks. I will say that I was at practice on Tuesday, the last practice that Gundy made available to beat writers of the team. Mason Rudolph was out of his boot. He didn't participate in many team drills. He only threw a couple of passes, was mostly on the stationary bike. And he did have just a little bit of a limp. So you could tell that it was, whatever the issue is that he's dealing with, there is some pain involved. But I think the root of the issue here that kind of makes this still an unknown is we just don't know what the injury was. If this was something that was just a little bit minor, like Barry had mentioned, in his post, taking out a chip of a bone or something very small, I think that maybe Gundy is being realistic about Rudolph's opportunity to play. At this point, I just don't think that we know. But even if that timetable that Gundy's talked about, coming back to practice this week, and then, going into bowl prep in New Orleans as being the guy, you wonder if there's going to be lingering pain. You're going to wonder about confidence, because when Mason Rudolph is his best is when he's able to avoid tacklers, keep his eyes downfield, and extend the play, as we've seen him do on so many different third downs this year. So if he loses any of that ability, I think it really knocks, just his overall skill set and what he's able to bring to this offense. And at that point, you wonder if J.W. Walsh isn't the better option, because, you're talking about a guy in Walsh who at least can help the Cowboys running game at times, as to where a limited mobility Rudolph, you figure that's not going to be part of his arsenal. So who knows at this point? The one thing I will say, Gundy is supposed to make Mason Rudolph available for interviews on Monday. So maybe we can pick his brain a little bit then. If he was seriously injured, I doubt that Gundy would make him available for those interviews. So we'll have to wait and see to what Rudolph says in just a few days here.
Jenni, Gundy's comments are coming at a time when, sure, Ole Miss is preparing for the bowl game, but a lot of Cowboy fans are preparing for their holiday travel. They're deciding whether they're going to pony up and go to New Orleans for the Sugar Bowl. Lots already have made those plans, of course, but Gundy's got a couple audiences here. And is there any risk that maybe talking up Rudolph creates some expectations for how good OSU will be in this bowl game, gets people to go to the bowl game, and then maybe lets them down when Rudolph does not play?
Oh, I suppose that is a risk, but I think Mike Gundy's probably most the most important thing to him is making sure he gives his team the best chance to win. Obviously he serves a lot of different masters when it comes to being a head football coach at a big university, but I think trying to win the ball game, give his guys the best chance to do that, to me, that's the thing that he puts first and foremost, taking care of players. So, I guess there could be some gamesmanship here. We've obviously seen it with Gundy before and how he talks about quarterbacks. We've seen it from in a variety of ways. Everything from Clint Shelf getting trotted out there in the opener and getting yanked after two series to give way to J.W. Walsh few years ago, and when it really looked like that Walsh was the guy from the get-go, that they really didn't have any intention of starting Clint Shelf long term. So we've seen all sorts of things. That's just the tip of the iceberg. So anything's possible. I guess we won't know until the game starts. But I think at the same time that, OSU still has a chance against Ole Miss even without Mason Rudolph. It's not as good a chance, obviously. He's your starter for a reason, and he does things that J.W. Walsh doesn't do. Clearly that would be the preference for OSU. But, I still think given this chance to sort of rest and rehab and game plan, I think they'll come out and have a good showing. I mean, look what they did last year in that Cactus Bowl. Granted, Sugar Bowl's a bigger bowl, but it's still, it's not a national championship scenario. And we saw him come out last year with all sorts of fun, plays and variations. The James Castleman, obviously catch, run earlier in the game. They had two quarterbacks on the field at a couple points. So, I think they'll come out with a good game plan and then just see where things go.
Barry, two questions. Do you endorse Gundy's gamesmanship approach, if it is indeed gamesmanship? And do you think Rudolph's going to play?
I don't blame Gundy for doing it if that's what he's doing. I mean, use whatever advantage you have, and if you got two different kinds of quarterbacks, and where this situation would help impede Ole Miss preparation, I don't mind him doing it. Personally, if I'm guessing, I'm going to say Mason Rudolph does not play.
Guys, let's move broader in the bowl games. You guys have all been doing research on Clemson, on Ole Miss, games you're covering, games you've written about. What's the most interesting thing you've uncovered, Jason, in your research reporting on Clemson?
Well, they've got a lot of different pieces than what they had last year. I think that's, both of these teams are pretty different from last year's Russell Athletic Bowl. I mean, Clemson lost some of their better defensive playmakers. They're going to be playing. Deshaun Watson had a torn ACL last year. So it's going to be an entirely different team. And then at the same time, new offense, the new quarterback, new offensive coordinator. So, I mean, that to me is what's interesting about this. This is a matchup we saw last year, but I don't think it's going to be anything like that game last year.
How about it, Kyle? What have you uncovered about Ole Miss that surprised you or you think's most interesting?
Well, obviously these are two different conferences separated by fairly sizable distance, but there's a lot of pretty close ties between these two teams. You got Jason Jones, who's Ole Miss's co-defensive coordinator, spent 5 years as an assistant at OSU. Obviously, Laquan Treadwell was recruited by OSU, their star receiver. They also have a star safety and Trey Elston, who had an OSU offer. So there are a lot of ties there, but without a doubt, the most interesting thing that's come out of Ole Miss is this Robert Nkemdiche situation. Whether or not he's going to play after falling out of a hotel window, some alleged synthetic marijuana use. At this point, Hugh Freeze hasn't made any kind of public comment as to whether or not that Nkemdiche is going to play. But just fascinating stuff, as this issue of marijuana and some states legalizing it and others not. And college football players and this whole conversation that's going to explode, I think, over the next few years. We're seeing it with a star player right before a Sugar Bowl. It's pretty fascinating stuff.
Hey, Kyle, the thing that is most interesting to me about that situation at the hotel is I've read and heard a whole bunch of different reports, and I still can't wrap my head exactly around what happened. It sounded like he broke through a window, fell, and then fell again. I mean, it really sounds like this was a weird situation that might have been fueled by drugs. It sounds like it probably was, but just crazy stuff.
Yeah, the initial report being that it was out of a 4-story window, and like you said, now apparently there's 2 falls that happened, and for a big guy, 6'3", almost 300 pounds, he gets away with it apparently with just some stitches in his back and his legs. So you also wonder just about his health. If Hugh Freeze doesn't suspend him for this game for that marijuana possession charge, how effective is he going to be after going through something like that? It seems kind of superhuman to be able to fall out of a window, and then a couple weeks later be able to play a game. But yeah, some very strange stuff coming out of there, and we'll definitely be looking into it as things unfold with this situation, which I'm sure in the next few days we'll learn a whole lot more about it.
Nkemdiche, of course, is a guy projected way high in the NFL draft, sometimes a top 5 pick. That's going to affect his status too, but OSU is getting ready to go against one of the best defensive players in the country, and we don't know if he's going to play. Barry, what about you? What have you come across that maybe surprised you or you think's particularly interesting?
Oh, I mean, I don't know if anything about the teams have surprised me. When I went through Ole Miss history, in some ways, this is the new golden age of Ole Miss football. Until last season, Mississippi had not been in a major bowl in 44 years. So they went to the 2 Cottons there against OSU, but that's when the Cotton was second-tier status. Last year they make the Peach Bowl after the Peach Bowl become a major bowl, now back in the Sugar. But because of Archie Manning and Johnny Vaught, they've always had sort of a status in college football. But they went 44 years without a major bowl game. So, this is still sort of it's a lot like OSU in that, in the Fiesta in 2011, now the Sugar in 2015. It's still sort of new. There's a newness and an appreciation for how cool this is that applies in Stillwater, that also applies in Oxford, Mississippi.
Jenni, what have you learned?
Well, you guys know that I tend to, gravitate towards the personal side of things. And I mean, I don't know if it's because he's the star for Clemson or what, but Deshaun Watson has been the guy that I've been most interested in, both on the field and off. Stumbled across a story that I think was an SI story that we shared on our website after I stumbled across it about his background, and, comes from a disadvantaged background. That's not anything new, unfortunately, among college athletes, but moved into a Habitat for Humanity house, which I thought was really interesting. And then he stayed really connected with Habitat because of how important it was to him. So that I thought was a really interesting aspect to him. And then you just add up, the kind of player that he is, and as good as Baker Mayfield is, and I think he is going to test Clemson. Nobody else in the country has had the kind of year that Deshaun Watson has had. The guy's been spectacular. If he was just a passer, he'd be terribly concerning. But he's a guy that not only can throw it with great accuracy, but has almost 900 yards of rushing. So I'm just impressed by him all the way around, and just keep kind of stumbling across great stuff about him.
Yeah, and on the field, of course, it's the storyline that the Sooners, whose march to the college football playoff really was aided in some ways by facing second-tier or even second- and third-string quarterbacks, now face, if not the very best, maybe the second or third best. Guys, last question. Today, or today in the paper, in the Oklahoman, last night on News OK, Jason Kersey wrote a story that outlined that Bob Stoops, if he would win, would go the longest between titles for any college football coach in history. But also in that story really became a lot about the longevity of Bob Stoops, the team of David Bourne, Joe Castiglione, and Bob Stoops, which we've written about. And then Jason reminded us, Bob Stoops has a $700,000 stay bonus that he gets if he stays every year. Jason, am I quoting that correctly?
That is correct. On June 1st of every year, he gets a $700,000 annual stay bonus.
So, Kyle, when you first heard of that $700,000 stay bonus, what's the first thought that came to mind?
Oh, well, I know that the Oklahoman has cycled through quite a few OSU beat writers over the years, so I'm wondering if I hit like year 4 or 5, is there some kind of incentive for me? I'm not going to throw out a dollar figure or anything, but I'm just saying if I prove some longevity here, maybe something is in the cards for me. Who knows?
We'll take you to Italian Express.
Oh, perfect. Sign me up.
I was going to say Ishins. Jackie O's selling you short.
I've yet to have Ishins yet, so maybe
that's a really good idea. An Ishins stay bonus. I like the idea behind that. Jenni, what kind of bonus would you craft into your contract if there was such a thing?
Man, I don't know. I don't have anything like Kyle, because I've been here now as long as Bob Stoops. He and I are on the same longevity here. So I've been covering Oklahoma sports as long as Bob Stoops has been around, my 17th football season. But, if you guys want to start doling out some cash, sign me up. I'm all for it.
Jason, of course, Barry Trammell is Jenni's David Bourne. I don't know if I'm Joe Castiglione in that. I don't know where I fit in that, but never mind. Let's not muddy the waters. What's your bonus idea for yourself?
No, I'm just hoping to have a statue someday. That's all. That you guys can parade down Main Street in front of the office.
You can take over one of the 3 guys outside the building here.
Okay, I'm writing all these down, by the way. Okay, Barry. First thought that came to mind when you were reminded of the $700,000 stay bonus, or a bonus that you would like to see in your deal, if you ever have one.
If I had a bonus, I would, I would like a laptop with a backlit keyboard. How's that?
You used to have one of those. We got to get.
I used to have one.
Jeez.
Barry should get Barry should get a bonus for every 10 blogs he posts or something.
Yeah. He should do it like Pandora. I think for every 100 blogs, they get 14. They have to pay out 14 cents to the artist. Every 10 blogs, you should get 7.5 cents.
The company would run out of money too quick. The guy blogs too much. He'd bleed us dry. I don't know if that's going to work.
I don't know about too much, but he blogs a lot. I'm thankful for that. Thankful for all you guys do. That's all for this Football Friday, but you can stay with the best coverage team every day at News OK and every morning in the Oklahoman. Merry Christmas.